people always want to know, how do you know, or how do you select the actual size of the label? Is that something, Dan, that you've heard in the past?
Yeah, that comes up fairly frequently, actually, Sharif, is, okay, I need a label. Well, what size label should I use? And if you're not lucky enough to have a specification or a drawing, you have to make a decision there. So first and foremost that you should consider is, what is it that you're marking? If it's a very small item, you don't need this big label. Quite frankly, the size of the UID labels are relatively small, and by relatively small I mean it could be a 2-inch by 1-inch, 3 by 1, 1.5 by half. They're relatively small because you really only need, in terms of compliance, if it's a Construct 1 format, you only need 2 pieces of information, and that would be your cage code and your serial number. Using Construct 2, you just need a cage, part number, and serial number. And then either Construct 1 or Construct 2, of course, you need your 2D data matrix barcode. So if that's all you need to put on that label, you could easily get away with a fairly small, again, 1.5 by half, 2 by 1, whatever. You have a lot of flexibility in terms of size, if a drawing or specification is not called out, because in Mill Standard 130, it does not tell you specifically which size label you should use. But you need a size that accommodates those requirements, and perhaps you may want to put some additional human readable information on there, which could be perhaps your company name or your company logo. Perhaps you want to put a location of where the asset is going to be, section 1, floor 1, whatever the situation is. Now, if you're marking very large assets, let's say large containers, perhaps you want to use a larger label, such as a 4 by 2 or a 5 by 3. Just so it's easier for the person, if they're looking at this large container and they're looking for a 1.5 by half-inch label, it's kind of hard for them to find that if there are other markings on a container. So in some cases, we do get asked for larger labels. But in any case, you just want to consider what you want to put on the label, but there's no need to go to these very large size labels if that be the case.
Okay. One other question that frequently comes up, and it really goes back to companies that want to put their logo on the label. Is that possible?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. For A to B, we've done that for a number of our customers. They like their logo on the label, which can be easily done. We would just need a file, like a JPEG file, a copy of your logo, and we can easily accommodate that request. It doesn't have any impact at all on compliance. It's just a nice to have to identify your company name on the logo. On the label.
Okay, that's good. What if I don't know, if I've got a requirement to label some assets, but I don't know the environmentals when I need to deliver these labels? I haven't gotten a clear direction in terms of if the assets are going to be indoors or outdoors or exposed to UV rays or cold. How would you recommend navigating that type of situation?
Okay, that's a great question. And the reason why I say that is I get asked that or told that a lot. Well, I have no idea. I just know it's this widget that I'm marking. I don't know what they're going to do with it. You should ask your contracting officer or have the contracting officer find some information for you. They should be able to give you at least a reasonable expectation as to what the conditions are, because it's your responsibility to mark these assets correctly. And the only way you can do that is by knowing this information. Now, if for some reason, and it has happened on rare occasions where there's just no idea or they're not willing to commit, you should get something in writing from them so that you can show a DCMA auditor, look, I made a full attempt to try and get the actual conditions, and I used the information that I had to make a decision, or my vendor, such as like A2B Tracking, could suggest appropriate marking methods. But that would really be an extreme condition where you couldn't have any idea what you're marking. But let's say you're facing that. What I would personally recommend is using a polyacrylic material, because that's kind of the middle of the road in terms of budget and durability. So that'll probably cover you in just about every case. I mean, if you're marking a Humvee, they should be able to tell you, what those conditions are. But if you have no idea or they just won't commit, to be safe, I would not go with poly or metallized polyester. I would move up to a polyacrylic to be safe, to get a little more durability that should cover you.
Okay, okay, that's good. And Dan, here's a question that comes up. It always comes up in terms of, and we've discussed non-compliant characters, or you've got your data, the syntax is you've got numbers that are on the serial number, or there are things that are missing. How do you go about correcting that? And that's again, we're talking about the penmanship, not just the readability, but the penmanship and the syntax. So how do you go about correcting those types of issues that come up?
Well, no vendor, certainly A2B does not, will create a non-compliant label, or at least they shouldn't. And the only way they can is if they are using non-compliant characters. So if the data being provided has non-compliant characters, it is the responsibility of the marking party to use compliant data. So they need to go back to your contracting officer, or whoever your contact is who's asking for this requirement. It's no big secret. All they have to do is look at the standard as to what the compliant characters are. So if a part number being used has a non-compliant character, or if the vendor itself knows what their part number is and they know it's a non-compliant character, they have a responsibility to make a decision by either removing or replacing it with a compliant character, because that's the only way you're going to be able to get a compliant label.
Yeah, and that actually, I think that hits home. But this next question that usually will come up in some of the discussions, everyone wants to know, how do they actually have an understanding or know that their label is actually DCMA,
DCMA approved.
So, that label would pass an audit.
Yeah, very simple. And it goes back to earlier, you want that certificate of conformance, you want that verification report. What we do here at A2B Tracking is we take all that information. We don't give you a bunch of paper. We will download it for you on a CD. That way you can download it on your computer, laptop, desktop, make as many hard copies as you want. Paper gets lost, so we provide it to our customers at no charge, right on a CD, easily downloaded files for them. If the CD ever became corrupted or damaged for whatever reason, they can contact me and we can easily get a replacement. But the get out of jail free card to easily pass or not be afraid of a DCMA auditor is documentation. And that documentation for Mill Standard 130 is your certificate of conformance and your verification report, without question.
Okay, I got a question from Dante that came in. It says, is A2B Tracking a contractor or supplier of the software and IUID material?
Absolutely. Yes. As Sharif had said earlier, we supply fully compliant software. UC Web is the brand name that can easily allow you to create Mill Standard 130 fully compliant labels. We certainly can supply you with all the appropriate material that you need, both software, hardware, consumables, blank labels, plates, everything that you need to be able to create the label yourself. Or if you wish to use us as a vendor to supply you with Mill Standard 130 labels. We've been doing this since the requirement came out way back in 2004. So we're very well versed in providing the material, hardware, software, or providing you with the actual end product.